you to today's webinar, Perspective and Predictability in Agile Release Planning. Before we get started, I'd like to make you all aware of a few technical items. All of you who are listening to the presentation are currently on mute. So to ask a question at any point during the presentation, just use the Q&A dialog box shown on the right-hand side of the WebEx screen. Laura will field as many of these questions as she has time for at the end of the presentation. If she does not have time to answer your question, don't worry. I will save all questions we don't get to and refer them to Laura so she can get back to you. Laura Zuber is QSM's Customer Support Manager and Lead Trainer. She has 25 years of experience in software development consulting, training, and support. She has conducted training and coaching sessions for all QSM Slim Suite tools and helped customers implement Slim across a wide variety of processes and platforms. Laura has managed software development projects, served as a senior software process improvement specialist, performed process assessments, designed and implemented best practices, and authored numerous training programs. She is a certified Scrum Master and lead consultant for using Slim with Agile development. So without further ado, I will let Laura get started.
All right. Thank you, Elizabeth. And confirm that you can hear me?
I can.
All right. Thanks. Yeah, thank you. And thank all of you for joining and taking time out of what's probably a busy schedule for all of you to listen to the presentation today. And I hope that it's helpful to you. You know, QSM has worked with a large number of customers adopting Agile methods over recent years. And many business executives and PMO and project managers still struggle to understand what the development teams and trains are working on. They struggle to know whether they can take on more work or not, and also what strategies they can take when budgets are cut. Agile methods, you know, have not eliminated the fundamental challenges of software estimating and planning. The beauty of Agile is the goal of producing potentially shippable software every few weeks, but it can still be hard to know when to release. When you're budgeting, you know, for 2020 projects and need estimates from your product leads and development teams, and you receive effort, cost, and schedule estimates in a spreadsheet, it can be difficult to visualize the impact to capacity and resource planning. Additionally, let's say you're responding to a request for a proposal and want to discuss a few options with your customer. It can be challenging to help them understand the benefits and risks associated with their desired outcomes and business choices. So the challenge of delivering well-planned releases is twofold. Leveraging data to perform a comprehensive analysis of what the options are based on feature sets, staffing, schedules, and costs, and effectively communicating the trade-off of various options at the project and portfolio level. Slim and the Slim suite of tools has always leveraged data, both historical data and completed projects, and data regarding project assumptions and constraints, employed robust predictive models, and a variety of analysis charts to make estimating more of a science, less of an art, repeatable, reliable. QSM continues to expand the analysis capabilities of Slim Suite tools to match current needs. Some companies only use Agile methods on some projects, while others use them consistently all the time. And Agile has improved communication by the practice of sizing development products or releases, whether you use features, epics, user stories, or all of the above to quantify value. That helps communication. So does the practice of tracing the status of user stories from the backlog to done, like this picture shows. Also like charting burn down and velocity, and having planning sessions every sprint or program increment. Those have all been good things to increase communication. But this data mainly supports the team and doesn't easily aggregate to form a picture of how the strategic vision is being realized. SLIM now makes it easy for all stakeholders to see how many sprints it will take to release before the project begins and forecasting release options for in-flight projects. We're excited to share today new features in SLIM Suite version 10.2 that will help you overcome the analysis and communication challenges that you may be experiencing. In thinking about the benefits of these features, the common needs to maintain perspective and increase predictability came to mind. Perspective about projects, how different stakeholders view the project and how each project fits within the portfolio. And the need to be predictable. How project goals match known capabilities and how changing assumptions about scope and effort and cost affect the schedule are important things to know in order to be repeatably predictable. That's hard to say. So I want to describe the basic features, and then I'll demonstrate their use in the SLIM suite of tools. The first new feature is the ability to display increment lines for release estimates and then recalculate the number of increments or sprints required based on forecasts for in-flight projects. You are looking at an average staff chart from SLIM Estimate, our estimating tool, and it shows the average staff on the x-axis and the calendar time on the x-axis. And this is, for this project, we have an average staff of reaching a peak of 10 people. This could also show effort or cost as well. The vertical lines are what we call increment lines, which most commonly means sprint lines, but not everyone uses Scrum. I'll show you how you can call them whatever you want that fits your processes when we get over to the tools. This estimate is indicating that 14 two-week increments will be required. Of course, if you use 3 or 4 week increments, then SLIM would recalculate and display the lines accordingly. This is what we're calling the base increment. For those of you that are implementing some form of scaled agile processes, you can set a level 2 increment that occurs at regular cadence with the base increment. So for example, here we've got something called a program increment that's going to occur every 5 sprints. The scale, that's what the Scale Agile framework, the term that they use is program increment. I think we had some of our consultants working on with an organization that called them code, also found this useful for defining code drops. So again, quite flexible, and I'll show you how you can make the names of the features here fit your processes. Similarly, what you're looking at here is we've made the capability available in SLIM Control. That is our tracking and forecasting tool, the next step in software lifecycle management. Once we've agreed on an estimate, then that estimate can be pulled into SLIM Control, and that forms the basis of your plan. And if you look at the legend here, then you can see down here, you can see that the plan is the blue bars here. We've got just a simple Gantt chart of the phases and activities to be performed. The red is the actual data, actual performance data to date. Minimally within SLIM Control, you would want value or how much size has been produced to date in effort. And then the green is an example of a forecast to complete. So if we're slightly behind, we've got control bounds here of green, and the yellow area might be when you dip into there a place to go do some investigative work. And then so we're taking and forecasting out that, and it's easy to see immediately that this project is slightly behind in completing story points and may need 2 more increments than originally planned. And I say may because in both Slim Estimate and in Slim Control, you have the ability to compute many scenarios or what-ifs to explore options like adding staff or reducing scope. You could run those two scenarios, forecast based on either one of those or a combination, and be able to log those solutions and do the comparison. So with each one, you would get this information, and this helps you visualize the impact of your business decisions. In both Estimate and Control, you can view and export effort and cost data by base increment and level 2 increment. So this is an example of a time series chart, toggled to a report. And again, this particular example is showing 2-week sprints, and yours could be 3 or 4. And you can export this report to Microsoft Excel and use it elsewhere. So we've got effort and cost here by iteration, and then you see the program increments over here. In Slim Control, you have the option, initially it's going to show plan, and then once you actually do have actuals and run a forecast, then it will show those for you, but you have your choice. The details about Agile Increments can be set, like I said, to match the way that you run your projects. We are marking a regular progression of time. So each increment is equally spaced, if you will. You can specify the name. I've used iteration, I've used increment or sprint. Again, that's probably what you might call them, but you can give it a name. You can specify the duration. And you can also determine where the sprint lines start and stop. For example, if you're modeling an entire project that has many steps in it, let's say you're doing requirements and design up front and some other things, after you do the major development and test component, you might only want the increment lines or sprint lines to show up during the development phase. You might use them across the entire life cycle. Again, it just depends on what your particular processes are. You can also set the starting number. It doesn't have to be sprint number 1. Maybe you've done a release after 6 months of work and you ended at sprint 14 and you want to start the next release with sprint 15. You can do that as well. The level 2 increments, again, support some other kind of grouping of increments, and you can specify the cadence for those and the name as well. So pretty simple. The settings can be found in the Customized Project Environment area of both applications for those of you who are familiar with Slim tools. We've added a new tab. You can see it up here called Agile Increments. And this feature is optional. So you toggle it on and off. When it's turned on, the lines and associated data will be available on every time series charts. Examples like I've shown, plus other metrics, your build-up charts, your burn-down charts, effort cost, any time series chart. And you can see here the fields that I described that you can customize for yourself. Whether or not you use the level 2 increments is also optional. And if those of you who are familiar are used to seeing vertical lines on charts depicting milestones. If you use milestones, they're still available, but there is a graphic toggle button on the toolbar where you can switch between milestones and increment lines. So again, you have control, and you can duplicate charts if you want to and set one to display a milestone and the other to display increments. So you're not losing any functionality. The second major feature in Slim Suite version 10.2 is the addition of quadrant charts in Slim Estimate and in Slim Metrics. Quad charts or bubble charts were introduced in Slim Master Plan, QSM's portfolio management tool, a couple of releases ago. Our users asked that they be added to Estimate to allow the same risk assessment capabilities in master plan, and to metrics to enhance completed project performance analysis and benchmarking. You know, some of our best product features have been requested by users, so keep them coming. Before I describe the chart details, I'd like to cover some basic analysis concepts available in most SLIN tools that will help you understand and appreciate the quadrant charts. A key component of the SLIM methodology is QSM's large database of completed software projects across a wide range of industry sectors and application types. Our company founder, Larry Putnam Sr.'s research 40 years ago, validated over the years with each database update and numerous research publications, shows the nonlinear relationship between core metrics, effort, staffing, duration, productivity, and defects against software size. And what you're looking at in this particular example is duration on the y-axis and effective size in lines of code on the x-axis. And you can, the nonlinear relationship, for those who remember your math skills back in high school, this is a log-log plot, and so a straight line on a log-log plot tells you this is not straight. It's curved and nonlinear. So we use scatter plots like this one to compute statistical trend lines for each data group or data set. Every core metric increases with size. So if this were effort over here or productivity index, you would see a similar upward trend towards the lines. And trend lines are created that on the charts we're typically going to show the average line here, plus or minus 1 standard deviation. You can show up to 3 standard deviations if you like, depends on the scatter of your projects. And the trends are used both as a source of estimate assumptions, such as t-shirt sizes and productivity, and a basis of comparison to sanity check estimates. Of course, the best practice, this is an example of a QSM trend line, but the best practice is to gather historical projects for your organization, and you can create your own. Here's a typical compare to history view in SLIM estimate, showing where your estimate, the blue square, if you can see it here where my mouse is, how it compares. In this particular example, we're using the QSM Business Agile Trends trend group, and the organization's history. That's the green triangles here. The proposed productivity index, which is a term unique to SLIM, productivity index in SLIM tools captures your entire efficiency, let's say, of your entire development organization. So it's probably a little bit different than something you may be thinking, not a traditional productivity number. But regardless, it's up here in the upper left-hand corner, is slightly higher than average and barely within 1 standard deviation. That is probably what enables the duration, effort, and staffing to be lower than average, right? If they're proposing to operate at a high level of efficiency, then that would mean maybe accommodating somebody's desire for a shorter duration and using less people and keeping the cost down. In terms of a way to interpret, if you look at these examples of average trend line plus or minus a standard deviation, it looks like the lines of a road. And you can use that metaphor as a guide to what's reasonable. If you're on the road, you're probably okay. So what SLIM does is help you stay out of what we call the impossible or the impractical zones. Impossible would be up here, right? Nobody's demonstrated a productivity like that. If you're going to sign up for that, it's probably a risky scenario. Notice also that historically, this company tends to have longer schedules and smaller teams. Creating a custom trend would make SLIM an expert source of estimate assumptions and risk assessment for that group, along with providing the ability to dynamically, we can also use that data within SLIM estimate to dynamically tune the lifecycle model to your processes and your methods. So the quad chart provides an additional perspective to trend variance analysis with a three-dimensional view. The X and Y axes show that deviation from trend I was demonstrating. And so what we were looking at on the previous slide. The range here on both of these, this is productivity index on this axis over here, and we happen to have selected duration on the x-axis here, and you can see it says deviations from trends. So this is actually showing plus or minus 3 standard deviations. You can customize that for whatever makes sense for your projects. And in this example, the bubble size is life cost. So this is the relative cost of each of and this is from Slim Estimate. So we're looking at different estimate solutions, the current one versus some what-ifing exploration that you might have done and logged those solutions. And we're also able to look at history. So it really lends quite a bit of insight by having all this information in one place. The green shaded area, if you can barely, it's kind of a very light green up here in the upper left corner. You can set a green target zone, what we call it, to highlight either behavior or estimate assumptions you want to encourage or to discourage. In this example, unrealistic estimates or unrealistic schedules, that's what we mean by an aggressive schedule. Unaggressive or primary cause of schedule and budget overruns. So project in this area of significantly higher than average productivity with schedules that are 2 to 3 sigmas below the average for projects of the same size. Because see, schedules down here, so we're in the very low area with high productivity. If your solutions tend to cluster in this kind of a zone, you might want to consider running a trend-based solution to bring the schedule and effort into line with their benchmark trends, representing what's typical performance based on history, and that will be a much lower risk solution. And just to show you the chart properties for the quad chart, you can see a list of metrics for which you can select the trend deviations up in the left-hand corner. Effort, duration, staffing, you can look at size, defects, or quality, and the productivity index would be found in this basic information folder. The bubble metric is selected down here, and again, very similar choices here as well. And this is where you can choose to set that target zone. It could be, a typical, you might want to put it in the middle, plus or minus 1 standard deviation in either way, and that would put it in the middle and encourage those solutions that are reasonable or typical. So that's quad charts in Slim Estimate. We also have them available in Slim Metrics, QSM statistical analysis and benchmarking tool. All of these projects here, though, are completed. The deviation from trends on this one has a duration, again, on the vertical axis, and we've got effort on the x-axis this time. The bubble metric here, instead of cost, is effective size. This amount of scatter of projects can be common. Actually, these are actually not scattered that much compared to what we see sometimes. And it looks a lot like their projects are in the lower left-hand corner, significantly lower than average effort and longer schedules, shorter schedules. And some of the bigger size projects fall into this quadrant, right? There's a big one there. Couple of medium-sized ones here. This one's close. So perhaps they have staffing issues. That might be one reason. We would want to go and dig further. So the chart's not going to show you what's going on, but we'll highlight some things to you might want to go investigate and see if there are some improvement opportunities. The rewards up here are just to let you know that in Slim Metrics, you're limited to one data set or group of projects. Imagine a database with tens or hundreds of projects. You can use queries to define different database subsets for different types of analysis you may want to perform. So you should also ensure that when you do want to use this chart in Slim Metrics and with your data set, that you associate with that data set a reference group, which is that reference trend group, and so that those statistics of the deviations from trend can be computed. Unlike the previous example where that target zone was in the middle to highlight good behavior, this green region shows charts denoting extreme or atypical schedule, effort, and productivity performance. I think we kind of went over what each of these mean. The highlighted green region combines, this again is significantly higher productivity and low effort. That may be a different combination than we've looked at before. With schedules and efforts that are 2 to 3 sigmas below average for projects of the same size as represented by the trend. So again, also, often aggressive schedules lead to poor quality and high cost. So you may want to compare this chart against another. And I'm going to walk you through an example when we get over to the tool, which is, I think, right now. So I'm going to start with Slim Estimate, which is of course, our estimating tool. And what you're looking at here is a staffing chart that I showed in the slides a little bit earlier, along with some additional information. In all of our products, we have the ability for you to have several different, we call them views. They're arrangements of charts and reports that you can configure and arranged in folders. And we have the same thing with the concept that Slim Collaborate is our online tool, and we do the same thing. We call them dashboards. What you are looking at here is I've run what we call a time box fixed team solution, fairly typical for some of our Agile customers. It takes, they're fixed, right? You want to find out if I've got a certain team size, 7, 8 people, whatever it might be, and I'd like to release on cadence, or I at least have a planned release coming up that's going to be 6, 7 months away, maybe only 4. Then I input that information and assume a productivity from history. And in this particular solution method, what Slim Estimate is computing is your capacity. It's going to calculate the number of story points that this schedule and team size can yield based on their productivity. So notice with our increment lines, we can see that this 5-month project is equating to roughly 10 increments. And this just shows you that's those scatter plots of where this estimate performance lies. And again, really nice to have some history here. In fact, we have a special view for that. If I can go down to our compare to history view. Here's our high productivity index and short schedules. Not too bad. Like I said, we're kind of on the road here, so neither one of these are crazy. They may be, but compared to what this particular organization has done in the past, it's aggressive for any project this big. They haven't demonstrated that they can pull that off yet, so it might be a risky scenario. One thing you can do in Slim, one thing it's built for, is to be able to very quickly and easily run multiple scenarios or what ifs to see what your options are. Again, like descoping. What would happen if we really needed to get it done sooner? Maybe we didn't produce as much, or we added staff. Those different options. Another nice way to quickly run a scenario is with our size growth analysis. This is representing we've got story points on the x-axis here, and the different schedule and effort and cost variables you would be interested in performing an estimate. And you can very quickly run a solution that says, well, what if it's slightly smaller? And you just click on the next smallest dot, and then you can see what the schedule, cost, and effort impacts are. Or maybe you'd like to see the reverse. What happens if this is, bigger than we thought? How long would it take? You could log each of these solutions and then do a comparison. Okay. On this view, we've very similar to the first one. We've just arranged a couple of other charts, and I wanted to show you a couple of ways that you could, with this control panel, these are dials that we can very quickly change the staff and see the impact. We can change the size and the productivity. And you can specify your target in terms of constraints you would not want to exceed. We've got one set here for just duration and for staffing. And then do that what-if analysis like I suggested and log solutions and see how it might come out. I've already logged a few solutions. I've done what I just described already. And so if I selected, I selected this solution that was slightly less capacity, not 1,400 somewhat story points, but closer to 1,000. Doesn't make the project too much longer. Now we can easily see that instead of 10 sprints, it's 14. And as you go back and forth from each one of those, I could even see them all here. When you, these bars here represent each of the log solutions that I've created. This one happens to be current, the one I just selected. And whenever you click on one of these, then these two charts here are updated. So you can always see the impact of and easily compare one solution versus another. So that's just getting a feel for, again, I quickly changed this one and then my increment lines were keeping up with me. Let's take a look at the quad chart down here in this other folder. So you're looking at the same current solution. This is the one I selected with the slightly smaller size, is the blue bubble here. Those other log solutions are the red log solutions. And then again, very helpful to be able to see the history along. So I've got productivity index on the y-axis here, and the same down here. The difference is we're comparing that to schedule at the top and comparing that to effort at the bottom. So the ability to perform a comprehensive analysis like this is really, in a very short time, is not only valuable for ensuring project commitments are supporting the business strategy with reduced risk, but going through this process itself facilitates communication. We're ensuring that all stakeholders are on the same page. They can each see what's going on here from a different view. I like this solution because it's in line, pretty much in line with my history, so I would feel pretty comfortable about this one. Let's take a look at Slim Control. So again, Slim Control is our tracking and adaptive forecasting tool. If I were to take that estimate that I just created, I don't think this one is exactly the same one, but I could say, okay, that's what I'm going to go with. That would be my plan, and I would pull it into Slim Control. And here's my plan. Here, this one is, it may be the same project. It's 14 increments. So this application takes your estimate and creates a plan, and then you can use it to track projects as they progress through the life cycle. You can perform adaptive forecasting, and I'll show you that in a second, to determine where the project will, end up based on your performance to date. This particular project, so we have some actuals. They are collecting it weekly. So we've got a bunch of, let me highlight this here. Okay, you can see that here's your increment lines. If this is every 2 weeks, then this is weekly data. You don't have to do it every week. If you're wanted to just collect some actual data when the increment or sprint ends, you can do that, and Slim will interpolate the data in between for you, so you don't have to worry about that frequency. I have a product construction view here that shows we've got story points defined here. And in Slim Control, you can define any number of custom metrics that you would want to use to measure the plan versus actual any metric. So these story points defined and the story points burned down are examples of custom metrics that's been created for this project. We have a template that already has them defined in there as well, because they would be pretty common for our Agile customers. So story points defined would be a way to track that work on the backlog. How are we going through and breaking down, or how good of a job are we doing going down and breaking the epics or features into stories, and in this case story points. You could do stories if you wanted to. The story burn down is a metric here representing the actual development and what's been produced each sprint. So it looks like the folks working on the backlog are behind. You can see plan versus actual over here, and the development team is catching up. So we might want to run a forecast to see where we might end up. The forecast always gives you an as of date, and here this is showing you all of the metrics that we're tracking in this particular plan, not a huge amount. And when we run a forecast, our plan data comes up. How many story points do we expect to deliver in the first place? Comes up, and you don't need to change these in a forecast, but you have the opportunity to do that. You could do a what-ifing here that says, well, what if it's smaller? Could we bring the schedule in? And very similar to that size sensitivity view that I accessed in Slim Estimate. I'm not going to change the forecasting assumptions. I'm just going to say, based on where our actual performance to date, where might we end up? And this shows you each of the metrics that you can choose to take advantage of or use in your curve fit forecast. And it tells you how many data points are being used and whether there's a good fit there or not. And you can specify which metric you have the most confidence in. Where would you like the weight of the forecast, if you will, to be spread across different metrics? So here we're just going to go. We're going to just use our count of completed story points so far. We've got an excellent fit with our plan, and we're going to just go with the QSM default, put 100% weight on that, just showing you the options that you would have here. So we're computing an effective new end date. And notice that we're also getting an idea of the PI being implied by our performance to date. And so now I've got this nice green forecast line taking off from the actuals to show where immediately I can see I'm going to need probably, again, a couple more sprints. And you could what if here as well, as I've mentioned, very similar to Slim Control, but easy to see how many sprints you're going to need. And then just to show you, I could do it here, toggle this to a report, and scroll down. And here's the effort and cost information by increment, and then by the secondary level of increment, the level 2 increment. Okay. So lastly, let me take a few minutes and show you the quad charts in SlimMetrics. SlimMetrics, again, is our statistical analysis tool that works with historical data that's in Data Manager, our historical repository. I'm down here in the quad charts folder, just highlighting some core metrics. These, the bubble size on each one of these charts is set to software size. Again, you could change it to cost or something else if you wanted to. We've got productivity on the y-axis for each of these, comparing duration, effort, and staffing. So again, a fairly typical view. This is one of the sample chart workbooks that comes with Slim. You could pull this up and actually look at this same data as an example. In the productivity chart versus duration up here in the left, we've got a pretty big project up here in terms of size. This customer billing project is about 750,000 lines of code. Here, having a high PI and low, higher PI and lower deviations. Sometimes it even takes me a second to understand what I'm looking at. That's good. This project is over. That means they achieved that PI and they brought the schedule in. So when you're looking at completed projects, it's a different story. But we say, and I think there's some verbiage to that effect down here, notes to you, that kind of work on a project or running a project that way can lead to quality issues. So we could pop down here to the quality area and see if we can find that same project, and here it is. It's not too bad, actually. So if we've got mean time to defect, it's SLIM's reliability quality measure on the x-axis here. So they're under average for this trend group, but they're within their target zone. They're only over here because of staffing, right? So, but if you kind of take your eye over here, so it's not bad, but it just shows, but look at the wide variety, and you would expect this with quality numbers anywhere, where it's some of those other metrics, they're tight around the middle. Quality is probably going to tend to maybe be all over the place. Again, it depends on your processes and how consistent they are. Let's look at another example. That was a very big project. In this same chart, in the lower opposite quadrant, we've got an example of a project with, it's a very small one, relatively speaking, compared to this one. And it was exhibiting low productivity and a relaxed schedule, meaning they kind of took a long time. They're way down here compared to the average for this trend group. Probably expensive. That might be an expensive project. Here's that same project down here with their staffing. So let's change the bubble size. So instead of effective software size, I could change that to cost. And now you can see that this same project, which was pretty small, was actually one of our 4 most expensive projects. Wow. I don't know why it was expensive, but I think I would go and try and find out. So I hope you can see some ways that you might be using all of these features across these 3 different tools that I've demonstrated. In closing, the old adage that a picture is worth 1,000 words holds true. Images inform and inspire. And I hope you can see how the project intelligence provided in these new features will help you instantly gain valuable insight about alternatives on how to run your projects. Schedule impacts of scope or staffing changes, for example, and perspective on performance analysis to pinpoint what's working well and what's not. I thought it would be fun to close by sharing this art from an exhibit I saw at the Dallas Museum of Art, a really incredible display of creativity using Legos. It was quite interesting. For those of you who are interested, the PMI PDU claim code is provided here, and I think at this time I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Laura. And just to remind anybody and let people know who might have joined a little late, just use the Q&A dialog box on the right-hand side of the WebEx screen to ask any questions, and I'll field those to Laura. To start, we have one that says, you mentioned we can choose the number of the sprint or increment. Does the number have to be an integer, or could it be something like 2.1?
It has to be an integer.
Okay. Next
you have the option of number of weeks. Let me just go show you. I got to learn to drive my PowerPoint here. So here's the Agile Increments. You have the duration is in weeks or days. So you could do days instead of a ratio of a week.
Okay. So the next question is, can the number of weeks per increment change, like starting with 2-week sprints and then going to 3?
Not within one particular release. So in Slim Estimate, we are modeling releases because of the level of development and testing being done. The assumption is that most organizations are defining, a consistent cadence, and that really has been our experience. You could select a different number of weeks or increments for like separate teams or for the next project, but within one release that you're estimating, they need to be consistent.
One of the products you showed, Slim Metrics, with the bubble charts, had Agile versus Waterfall as a selection/folder on the left-hand panel. What is this?
Oh, that's a good question. So that is an example. Let me see if I can find one. Oh, here's the folder that you're talking about. So this is a way. This shows you just some of those scatter plots. This is a sample database that, again, with Slim, anyone who has Slim can pull this file up and look at it. It's just to demonstrate what's possible. And so we've got it. This organization has a number of projects collected from history. Some of them were developed using Agile methods, and some of them were developed using Waterfall. And so they have tagged those projects accordingly in their history, and we've created 2 different data sets. So on this chart, we're showing 2 different data sets. One is the Agile projects, and one is the Waterfall projects. Good question. So however you would group your data, then you could also do comparisons like that.
Is QSM planning a Slim RPA?
Can you define RPA? Is that a release planning something? I don't know. I'm guessing.
Let's see. We'll make it a clarification. Robotic process automation.
Probably not. You write me an email and I'll explain that to me, and then I'll answer you an email.
Yes, feel free to connect with us directly and we can clarify on that. Another question we have is what do you mean by Slim having a predictive model or having predictive models?
In a couple of ways that I have shown, and that I think the way I think of it, the trend lines, like you're seeing here, show patterns of performance that are often consistent for different project types. So like the Agile and the business groups here, we see different performance. And so those trends are pretty much going to, they'll help you see that assumptions are going to be when are inconsistent, right? So we're basing a lot of, using the trends a lot in the calculations, and therefore predicting what your typical behavior is going to be. So just using the trend lines as a source of assumptions is one way. I think the second way is in Slim's production equation model itself. Modeling that nonlinear trade-off between time and effort will show you things like doubling your team size is not going to come anywhere close to cutting the schedule in half. I was working with the customer yesterday, and it was almost shocking to see the number of people it would take to bring a 6-month release in by 2 months. Cutting 2 months off of a 6-month project is asking a lot, and it was a huge number of people. And so those kinds of that kind of prediction is in the model.
Okay. Can you compare the original number of increments to the forecast?
So that would be in Slim Control. You could do it visually by showing the increment lines originally for your plan, and then you may want to have another chart where you can show actuals plus forecast, and do like I've done here and toggle a chart to report, and then you can export these to Excel. So you could either do it visually, or like here you can see easily the difference is, a little over 14 plus well over 16, or you could do it in a spreadsheet with the different reports.
What data do you need to capture history?
So, like historical projects. That's Slim Data Manager, and it's actually surprisingly little information. Slim defines 4 high-level phases or groups of activities, if you will, like development and test. So first we would need to size your completed project in something like user stories or features. What is it that you delivered in terms of functionality? And QSM can help you do that. And we would also want to know the duration and calendar time and the effort. So with just sizing and duration and effort by phase at a high level, it's not that much information. And again, we're more than happy to help you do that.
How do you know which quadrants on the chart are the risky ones?
That's a good question. I think if we looked at, and again, it depends on, you could see hopefully that when we were talking about estimates, we're looking about what we might do and having an aggressive productivity and a high productivity and an aggressive schedule means we're proposing, right? These haven't happened yet. These are not completed projects. The completed projects are the gray ones. But what we're interested in and looking at is the solutions that we might propose to our management or to customers. And to be in this area with one of your proposed solution, you would be claiming to sign up for a productivity that's not only high by the trend standards, but certainly high than anything than you've ever demonstrated. So high productivity, low schedules, low effort, that combination is risky. And even though this looks like it might be safe, it's actually not safe. It can be just as risky because you're gonna have a low productivity and a longer schedule, which means you're going to tie up resources for a longer amount of time, and it's going to be expensive, like I showed with that one project that looked tiny compared to size, but then it was really big when you made the bubble, the cost measure. You could see that the risk here is spending too much money, and I would again want to, certainly if someone were proposing that would be an opportunity to maybe have a discussion and save some money. So it will depend.
That's the last question we have so far. Does anybody have any further questions? Laura, maybe you could bring up the contact info slide again, just
Sure.
in case anybody wants to get in contact with us afterwards.
Yep.
Well, unless we have any further questions, I'd like to thank Laura for a great presentation today. And if any of you came in late to the presentation, oh wait, I might have gotten one last question. Oh, cool. Is Slim Collaborate similar to Slack, Trello, or Microsoft Teams?
I'm not familiar with the first two. Microsoft Teams, no. What Slim Collaborate, we use Teams at QSM, so I'm familiar with that one. The other two, again, if you want to give me an email and explain them to me, but if they are like Teams, then what Slim Collaborate does is it provides the ability to run estimates and do the history and the portfolio analysis, just like I've demonstrated here in the desktop. That is our web-based solution for enterprises. So it's an estimating and software lifecycle management tool, part of our suite as well. It's online instead. So you can collaborate, and we're implementing a little bit of workflow in there, but it's not it doesn't only do that. It's about estimating and analyzing software projects at the portfolio level, particularly, and for enterprises.
Does Collaborate have all of the capabilities of Slim Estimate?
it doesn't have all of the capabilities of Slim Estimate. They're made to work together. Generally, what we're helping folks do at the enterprise is use Slim Collaborate to help people get involved in the estimation process where estimation isn't a main part of their job. They stakeholders might just want to be able to view and review and approve estimates, look at budgets across the portfolio and things like that, or maybe contribute. Maybe they're a subject matter expert and all they need to do is contribute a size estimate. Collaborate makes all that possible, and it's supported. The main algorithms and templates are created in Slim Estimate, and they are made to work together, but we see what we call it the back office. Was people who using Collaborate would generally have a handful of people using Slim Estimate to take care of using those more robust features that are in Estimate and keep Slim Collaborate pretty powerful but less complicated.
Okay. If anybody wants to fire one last question, feel free. Give it 1 minute. Let's see. And this is a question I was going to answer. One person was wondering, is there going to be a presentation that they can get their hands on if they came a little bit late? And yes, we will have a replay of this presentation available. I will send out an email from QSM. And also, I believe we will have the slides available for download as well. So if there's anything you missed, you'll be able to watch this replay. And once again, if you have any additional questions, you can just use the contact info that you see up here. And I'd like to thank Laura for a great presentation today. And stay tuned to QSM for future webinars and articles and research. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, folks.